Basic appraisal procedures, page 168. A house on the leased site. Given the presence of data to develop it, the ground rent capitalization method could certainly be employed in such cases. Weaknesses of the ground rent capitalization method. Net income data can, in some cases, be difficult to obtain for comparable properties. Appraising large tracts of land. Purely for informational purposes, we'll discuss the appraisal of large tracts of land. These challenges often present themselves in the course of a residential appraiser's practice, and the appraiser should know how to handle them. Specifically, let's look at agricultural properties and land with potential for development, either residential or non-residential. Competency to proceed with such an assignment must be carefully considered. There are many licensed and certified appraisers who do not possess the competency to appraise agricultural or development land. In fact, practice in these areas is often considered a specialty. Agricultural land may appear seemingly simple and non-complex, and depending on the scope of work and the presence of truly comparable data, it could be. Many times, instead of something built on the surface of the land, there are things growing on it. Crops, for example, must be addressed and can be considered either personal property or a fixture. If the crops are planted and are the property of a tenant, the crops are considered an element of personal property called emblements. In this case, the tenant can re-enter the property to harvest the crops until the first crop matures. If the crops are planted and owned by the property owner, the crops are considered fixtures. Thus, if on the effective date of the appraisal, crops are present, the appraiser must consider the contributory value on that date as the crops would transfer with the property, unless that interest was not being appraised. That would need to be addressed in problem identification. However, do not think that simply because there is nothing built on the surface, there is little to consider. Much of the value of agricultural land rests with what is below the surface. There are reported to be more than 20,000 different soil types in the United States. Soil quality is measured by the production capability, physical stability, and topographical and physical characteristics. The complexity of soil composition is compounded in that soils tend to run in strains. It is not unusual for a 20-acre parcel to have several types of soil present. From a quality standpoint, page 169. The range may run from poor to excellent, and a 1 acre may not have the same qualities as an acre located next to it. Appraisers who regularly appraise agricultural properties are keenly aware of the relationship of soil type and classification to value. If the sale comparison approach is used to develop a value opinion of an agricultural property, comparing the soil types among the subject's comparable properties is much like comparing the subject house and a comparable house in a residential assignment. Tillable land is usually more valuable than pasture land. in many areas. Where that is the case, a complex income approach using crop production and yields may be warranted. Another method is the ground rent capitalization method. When the farmland is commonly rented, myriad data is available through public and private sources for research and analysis of agricultural land, income, and production data. These scenarios become complex and are addressed in advanced, specialized appraisal courses. In the context of highest and best use, many areas of the country are seeing a trend toward agricultural land's highest and best use being development. In many cases, residential development. When this is the case, the subdivision analysis method is often employed and is a process that requires a high and specialized level of competency. Improvement, description, and analysis. In addition to terminology, nuisances used to describe non-residential improvements and their components, a notable difference is found in describing a building's measurements. The defined area of a residential property is described as gross living area. Non-residential improvements are described commonly as gross building area, GBA, or gross leasable area, GLA. Residential appraisers will notice quickly the acronym both for gross living area and gross leasable area is GLA. Therefore, care must be taken to determine the context in which the term is being used. In this section, GLA refers to gross leasable area. The methods for determining GBA and GLA may differ, depending on custom in various geographic areas. So to prevent confusion and misunderstanding, the appraiser should carefully describe the techniques used to determine the area and apply all data consistently. The calculation of GBA and GLA are determined somewhat differently than gross living area. Gross building area, GBA, uses the exterior dimensions of the above grade or superstructure and below grade area or substructure of a building. If there are multiple buildings, each should be described separately.